Welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
And of course, we are now into the Parsha, the second to last Parsha of the Torah, Ha'azinu, give ear. And we've already gone through, 4 verses of this. There's a lot of Rashi on this and a tremendous amount of Torah Tmima on this, which we'll, God willing, get to at some point. But we'll keep working through the Chumash and the Rashi for this time. So it's basically, it starts off, this is actually where the previous verses are addressing and asking the heavens and the earth to witness what Moses is about to tell the Israelites. So I think it's called an approbation, possibly. And this is in a way where the whole thing starts, where it's declaring God's righteousness. So again, it's well set up in how this poem is constructed. So this basically is talking about how God's work is perfect, right? All his ways are justice, right? Faithful, no iniquity, righteous and upright is he. And then we get to this. Shichet lo, and it's really a question here, right? Is perversion his law? Banav munam. So the answer to this question is law. Perhaps we could make it as a statement as shichet lo, right? That perversion is not to be found in him. Banav mumam. Again, I can tell you that the Hebrew syntax is not easy at all. I guess we could say it's poetic syntax. It takes some license, I think, with the language. Literally, it means his sons, their defect. So meaning it's his sons that bear the defect. And describing the defect a little more specifically, not very specifically, but more specifically, what do we mean by a defect? A generation, door, ikesh, crooked, ufataltol, and perverse. And Rashi will go into these words. Again, Hebrew poetry can be, from a vocabulary point of view, quite, it's highly literary, and pretty much any language, when it gets into, if it has a literary form, it's much more complicated, and the vocabulary tends to extend quite significantly in that situation. So let's take a look. This is where we actually left off last year. Shichet lo the gomer. So shichet lo, perversion is his, etc. Targumo. So he says we understand this as the Targum understands it. Chabilu, here's the word chabilu. I translated it here as corruption lahon, so meaning corruption is theirs, lahon to them, lahem, velo le, and not to him. That's the error. That's dafka the way in which we would translate that. That's the Aramaic, right? So I looked up chabilu in the Gestor dictionary, and the best I could come, there's a bunch of words that are, it can also mean, I believe lachabol means can damage, stuff like that. So one translation was, chabilu lahon, right? Woe to them. Lo le, okay, and is not to him. So the Targum clearly takes this as an abbreviated form of this, right? Okay, so in other words, the troubles will go to them. They're not his. Benaya di palchu, and then he says, sons di falchu, who served the ta'avata, which sounds like it. Ta'ava means it's like when you yearn, but in a negative way, for something. Dara de ashniu ovadohi, a generation that has changed its service. V'ishtaniu. Okay, so again, so ashniu, ishtaniu. Again, this is a reflexive form of this word. So in other words, how you can see that the Targum is taking a lot of poetic license here in terms of the translation, that it's more of an interpretation than a translation. And I'm trying to think of how I'd like to translate ta'ava. Gosh, it's just escaping me this moment. But
So
if
when you say it's a negative kind of yearning, does that mean it's a yearning for something negative, or it's a yearning that has a kind of angst-ridden feeling to it?
okay, I just thought of the word. The word is lust. That's the word.
Oh,
To lust.
neither.
Right. Yeah. Well, it definitely is a yearning, right? It's wanting something very badly, extremely, but definitely has a negative connotation to it.
Well,
Ava is a lust.
it
That's
doesn't have to have a negative
it possibly
depends,
does.
I guess, on your perspective, but they talk about like there's lust for life, lust for this,
Correct.
lust for that,
I
and
know.
even
Right.
lust for a person doesn't have to be construed as a negative thing. Its actions can be negative.
I would agree with you. It's a beautiful, I think it's a Hasidic explanation of why God created the world. And the answer is because I think lusts tend to be more emotionally driven than rationally driven. And the Hasidic, as I recollect it, was that God had a lust to create the universe. So you're right. It doesn't necessarily, context really determines how negative it is. But I think here it's talking about lusting after something that wasn't following God. And again, yeah, just to be able to have some control over what you're lusting over. But in some ways, that's almost a contradiction in terms. At any rate, I'm going to go on, right? Banav mumam, again, because of the syntax here. Banav hayu, look at this, how he pulls apart some of the connotation of the language, right? They were his children, the hashchata shehishchitu, and the perversion that they went after, he mumam, that is their defect. That's the defective element that they have. Again, banav mumam. So mumam shel banav, the defect of his children, haya velo mumor. That it was, the point is that, again, what the language is trying to say is that whatever defects are going on, it belongs to his children and not his defect. It's not that he has a defect. Dor ikesh, a crooked generation. Akum, so that's a clearer Hebrew word. Akum means crooked, right? Ukal, and perverted. The more, and he gives an example from another verse from Micah chapter 3. Ve'et kol hayishara, and everything that was straight, ya'akshu, there's the ikesh, right? They perverted, they made crooked, uvelashon mishnah, and he says, and in rabbinic Hebrew, the language of the Mishnah, the Hebrew of the Mishnah, chulda, a weasel, sheshineha akumot va'akushot, that a weasel whose teeth are bent, curved, and crooked. So that's how the word is used in Mishnaic Hebrew. Fatal again, all these somewhat unusual words. Fatal would mean twisted. And here's your French word, right? Entourtai, something like that, or tourte. And the Yiddish that's put in here is verdreht, which means crooked, or or turned. Dre means to turn, right? Turned around. And he gives a clearer explanation of what he's saying here. Kifetil hazeh, like this thread, she godlin et oto, that they extend it, this thread, umakifin oto, and they surround him, svivot hagadil, around the central strand. So what we're doing is we're turning and twisting around this one thread around a central thread. And that's that idea of patal tol.
Yeah, mine says a candle wick.
Oh, really?
That's
Yeah, no,
braided.
that's true. That's true too. Yes. It can also mean a candle wick. You're right. I do believe, though, I looked up the word here, but I will put in candle wick as well. Thank you.
And mine says the
Go on,
French
it's
word
fine.
is, go ahead.
No, please do. Please do. Because
And mine says the word is entortilier.
okay.
Antortiliez. Entortilier.
Let me put that in here.
Kind of fun to say.
Yes, it is. And let me see if I can write it in. E-N-T-O-U.
A-N
Okay. Go ahead.
and tort, which is the root of the word, like
Yes.
torture, tortuous, tort.
Yes.
Ilieyez.
Thank you. Okay. Oops. Sorry. Okay. Thank you. I think I got too many L's in there.
One L.
Yes. All right. But thank you. I agree.
Oh, and you left out the I between the L and the Y. It's entortilier.
Maybe that's what I thought was an I.
Yeah, probably.
Okay, there we go. All right, thank you. Patal tol. So again, we've got this word patil, right? Min hatevot. He says the fact that it's patal tol, right? You know, the tal. He says this is among the words hakfulot that are double, that it's a double word, double form. Kamo yerak rak. Okay, I think that has to do with greenish. So it means sort of the ish part of it.
This one translates it as dark green.
Okay.
As opposed to ish, but like a more level of intensity.
Okay. I've heard it. Okay.
And same for the next one.
So he says deep red.
Dark,
Okay.
he says, but yeah, deep would be synonymous.
That into. I've seen it as that, as meaning ish as well, but that's okay. I'm gonna put okay.
That's interesting because that's like kind of the opposite.
I know. Sometimes in time words can get different meanings, but okay, we'll keep that as a suggestion there. Scharchar means roundabout, and sgalgol means roundish. Now these I looked up in the dictionary, so what can I say? Translations. Okay. Thank you, though. I mean, I like to feel that these classes are actually, us learning together. So this little note here is telling you that this hey is written large in the Sefer Torah, and also Vehi Teva Bifnei Atzma, and that it has to be written as if it's its own word, right? So that's why it's separated from the Lamed, right? So Ha Ladonai Tigmalu Zot. And this ha here, okay, is a question. It's the interrogative. Hey, by the way, just to explain stuff, it says halamed, that is the letter lamed de gusha, has a dagesh in it. And here's what the reference is. You see that little circle there is referring to this, because the fact that there's a dagesh in the lamed seems unusual. And I believe there's a commentator called Minchat Shai who comments about these sort of strange little these things in the Torah that don't fit the normal pattern, and what their significance is. So he made his study in terms of trying to mine out what their significance was. So Allah Shem Adonai Tigmalo Zot. Do you attribute this to God? We'll finish up the sentence. Naval, and this is, I think, in other words, he's saying he's addressing, inferior, vile people, the lo chacham and unwise. Halohu avicha, behold, indeed, he is your father. Konecha, he has acquired you. Hu oscha, he made you. V'yichonanecha, and he has established you. Right, set you up. In other words, here we're talking about appreciation, right? And not appreciating really what God has done, understanding God's role in our lives. So Rashi. So halashem tigmaluzot. So he says lashon tema. This has the expression of surprise, of questioning, right? V'chi lefanav atem ma'atzivim. Because indeed before him you are causing distress. Sheyesh beyado, because he has the power, literally means he has in his hand, he has the power, the para, to exact punishment. In other words, why are you doing this? You're only going to hurt yourselves. Mikeb, from you. V'shehetiv lachem, and nevertheless, right, God has done well by you, b'chol hatovot, in all kinds of good acts. Am naval, right? Oh, people, oh, foolish people, or vile, or something like that. Sheshachachu, who have forgotten et ha'asui lachem, that what was done for them, right? Incidentally, on the word naval, it's related to a word nevela. And the word nevela basically refers to the carcass of an animal that has died of itself, that has simply died naturally. And a nevela, it's referred to by that same word, right? Because one is forbidden to consume it. It's considered to be a vile thing to consume an animal that has died naturally. I will tell you that I had heard an interpretation that one of the purposes of shechita, of ritual slaughter, is to allow the animal's soul to be elevated. That is something that the act of shechita does for the animal, which is why now the body is you're allowed to eat the meat of such an animal that is ritually and properly slaughtered. Okay. V'lo chacham, and not wise, lahavin, wise enough to understand, et hanoladot, the consequences, sheyesh biyado lehaitiv ulahara, because God has the capability of doing well for a person. This is causative, he feel, and to, or it could be lahareya, I suppose, but I think it's lahara, and to do bad, to cause bad things to happen, or to cause good things to happen. Halohu avicha konecha, right? The way I translated it was, he is your father who has acquired you, right? Yeah, and look at how Rashi takes this word hanecha and interprets it differently, plays around with it. So shekinacha. So here's the word from the word kain with a kufnun, which means a nest, a bird's nest, right? He has nested you. Bekanancha bekain, because he nested you in a nest haslaim of the rocks. Uva eretz chazaka, and in a harsh land. Shetikencha, because he outfitted you, b'chol minei takana, with all kinds of, I was trying to find a good word for it, this was as best as I could do, improvement. I mean, that's the essential connotation of this word. In other words, things that make your life easier, more pleasant, etc. Hu ascha, he made you, uma ba'umot, how did he make you? As a nation among nations. Yeah, go ahead.
Rabbi, before you go into the next Rashi, I just want to mention that the Chabad is making the first two parts of that verse into questions, because there's another hey where it says hello,
Yes,
hello, who, so it says for here, is this how you repay the Lord, you disgraceful, unwise people? And then it says, is he not your father? Instead of he is your father, it says, is he not? Because it has that hey again.
right, right. But it is an interrogative. That's the point. The halor is the hey. It's more than, it's not law in, yeah, okay, I guess you could. But when
Well,
you
that,
use, when you start a word with, okay, so for example, the way I would translate it in French would be est que, where you can turn a
mhm,
sentence into a question by simply
right,
introducing a word, and
right.
that's my sense of the word halor. Okay, and it's
Yeah,
true.
but
Yeah,
I
is it
think
not? Mhm.
I was responding because I think you just read it, he is your
I
father,
did,
as
I
opposed to,
did. Right.
isn't he your father?
Right. No, no, no. It's more accurate. It is definitely interrogative, but it's also it's not a it's not simply a question. It has more of a sense of an you know more it's a rhetorical question. David,
Right.
David.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, you were said about things that make your life easier. So you're talking about conveniences. Is that what you mean? Things
Yeah,
that
I mean, right.
And here it says reparations for that,
Yeah, I don't
but
know if
that's,
reparations is a helpful word there.
yeah,
Okay. I mean, the
so
word, they're trying to get the word letaken means to repair. Okay, yeah, go ahead, David.
no, I was just wondering what the intent. Okay, if it's not that, then that's fine. That's just yeah.
I mean, if you
But
think about all the things that we have in life, right? Like electricity, right? The conveniences, that's
yeah,
maybe that would be a good word for me to type in there, right?
yeah,
Although,
that's what I was thinking when you said
yeah,
all the things that have been provided to make your life easier. Those are conveniences, right? So
yes,
anyway, that's just a
yes.
suggestion.
No, thank you. Right. And I think the whole point about a convenience is that it's not a necessity, and
Correct.
that's I think what it's saying here is that God has not just made it possible for us to survive, but life, that what God has done is make it even much better than simple survival. Okay.
Yes.
So, Lauren, thank you for being meticulous about that. Yeah, what I was trying to make sure is that it was more of rhetorical question and not a
yeah,
question.
it's translated here as rhetorical. It's obviously rhetorical.
Yeah,
Is he not your,
yeah,
father?
right, right. Yeah, that's
Not
good.
like, is he your
Yeah, I
father?
also understand how law also to be an emphatic, right? Like indeed, it can also be understood that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's why I was going in the way I went, right? Yeah. I mean, even though is he not is a way of saying indeed, but you have
It
an
is,
English
yeah.
word. We have an English word that takes it a little step where it belongs. Right. Anyway, thank you. V'yichonenecha, uh, so he has established you. Acharechein, he says, after all this, the chol mine basis. Okay, and I think this v'chein means thus, and there really is no period here. It might be a colon, but not that. But it's the sentence, the phrase ends here, right? And he says, in other words, the basis means some kind of foundation, right? Something that sets it up, that makes it permanent, right? And after all this, with all types of ways in which this is well-founded, v'chein, and thus, mikem kohanim, some of you are kohanim, are priests, mikem nevi'im, some of you are prophets, umikem malachim, and some of you are kings. And now just in terms of using this metaphorically, so it could refer, it could, like a fortified city, in which everything is dependent. Those people depend on this city. And just the fact that prophets and priests and kings are in a way where things can get based in. So
And
So-
this one says Sifrei 32:6.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have, let me see, I'm looking. Here's something. Here's a reference to the Sifrei here. And oh, look at all these Torah Tamimas here. Okay, a lot of Rashi though. Okay. This is probably a good place since this is the Sheni. We can stop. I'm going to stop right here. Tomorrow morning, I actually have an appointment. Let me stop the share and the recording.